So I bet a lot of you have come across photos of this blonde lady with these super thin eyebrows and a deadly look, wearing a tuxedo and what appears to be maybe a 1930s photograph. Well, that mysterious lady is one of the most famous actresses. That lady is Marlene Dietrich. Not just a fashion icon or actress, but she later became an absolute icon for the LGBT+ community, and so many artists have drawn inspiration from her. People like Madonna, Janelle Monáe, Lady Gaga, or even the character of Jessica Lange as Elsa in season 4 of American Horror Story. But to understand how someone with her level of fame was able to get away with her queerness and sexuality while also being incredibly successful in mainstream, we need some context, we need to break this down. Welcome to this episode of Hidden Hollywood, and don't forget, please like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue delivering more videos. So back to the life and queerness of Marlene Dietrich. So Marlene was born almost 120 years ago in Berlin, Germany. She started to work as an actress in the silent film industry. While she was also working in bars and performing songs, dancing, doing cabaret, she was doing all of that in the 1920s. She would do early ballroom cabaret and Vogue in the Weimar era of Berlin. Between the Great War of World War I and World War II, Berlin went through a huge phase of sexual liberation and diversification. You see, after World War I, Germany had to pay tons of reparations. They had signed an extremely unfair Treaty of Versailles, and it left its economy completely wiped. So in the city of Berlin, this is a lot to explain in one video, and I'm sure there's a lot on YouTube you can look up about this, but essentially, there was everything from destitute people on the streets to a huge booming art scene and a life of people who were living it up to the best of their ability in times of a lot of chaos and struggle. The organized LGBT+ group of people made Berlin the capital of essentially Europe. It was known as the gay scene, or what we would call the queer scene. So the writer Clayton W. Wisnett described in his book Berlin as Sodom and Gomorrah put together, a sure sign of the land's degeneracy. He also talks about the clubs as places where many artistic expressions were displayed, such as singing, cabaret, theater, while others were more focused on creating space where men could mingle among themselves and cruise, if you know what I mean. He talks about bars where soldiers would go to, let's say in a family-friendly way, to give a pleasant service in exchange for money. He also notates there were establishments from which he highlights the presence of cross-dressing, what they called then, performing songs and dances for audiences, and the pubs that were exclusively for lesbians, where the ambiance was a bit more refined. And here's where we come back to Marlene. So he wrote about El Dorado, a nightclub, which he describes as a festive atmosphere that attracted not only homosexuals, but also artists, authors, celebrities, and tourists wanting to admire a piece of decadent Berlin or catch a glimpse of someone famous. In which the main attraction were actually trans people who performed there, not just people in drag. And here is where Marlene used to work. She performed songs, did cabaret numbers, and tons of other stuff. And for anyone watching, if you know the movie called Cabaret, the musical film with Liza Minnelli, this is exactly the same exact time period and situation. So here is where Marlene became aware of her bisexuality and her taste for bending the gender norms. So she was bisexual and also non-binary or genderqueer. She started to cross-dress, wearing suits, tuxedos, pants, and other typical hetero male clothing pieces, finding in this way her signature look. She flourished as an artist and a person in the queer scene there.
You don't want to make a scene here, do you?
No, I don't want to make a scene. Not for anything in the world.
Could you explain it a little bit for us?
Yes, I will explain it. Yeah. It's called a penis envy in English. Die haben das Ding nicht, und das ist ja das ihr ganzes Unglück. Nicht wahr? Die wollen das haben da und haben es nicht. Da kommt die ganze frustration hier.
After her big break in Germany, she immediately embarked for America. And when I say immediately, I mean the same night of a film premiere, she was traveling to Hollywood on a ship to sign her contract with MGM. So the first film that came out of the MGM contract was this iconic film called Morocco, made in 1930. So in which the Berlin effect really shows through. She wore a tuxedo in the film and even kissed another woman on screen. So the kiss scene was added at Marlene's request. And not only that, but she saved the scene from being censored. So in the scene, she takes a flower from the woman before kissing her and then gives the flower to Gary Cooper. So when she confronted the censors, she explained to them that if they cut out that scene with the appearance of the flower, it would just make no sense later in the film because the flower comes up again. So to put it in context, back in the day, when something was cut out of a film, it wasn't preserved. There are exceptions, but most of the time these historic pieces were thrown into a fire. So Marlene not only made history, but literally saved that film from being thrown out and burned entirely. An icon. So, biographers Stephen Bach and Maria Rivera confirmed she did have love affairs with Edith Piaf and screenwriter Mercedes D'Acosta. Something I found outstanding is actually her love affair with actor Errol Flynn, as well as his wife, Lily Diamantilla. Do it, girl. She had many lovers and boyfriends and girlfriends and different people that she, dated for decades. It's important to highlight that one of her lovers described her perfectly. The writer Kenneth Tyan declared that having sex with her was like having it without gender. She was an incarnation of androgyny before it was even a thing. So her long list of lovers includes so many names, but a couple famous ones would be Frank Sinatra, JFK, Eric Cooper, Gary Cooper, John Wayne, many, many more. That's just the heterosexual cis men. The one that's been highly rumored for decades is her alleged love affair with Greta Garbo. There are, of course, many different women over the decades that Marlene Dietrich had a relationship with, but on this episode, I want to talk about Greta Garbo. Their success, both of them, came around almost the same time as each other in their career, so naturally they were pitted against each other in the media time and time again. So both actually enjoyed throwing comments at each other, so basically they'd read each other in the press or drag each other for fun. So Garbo would pull a Mariah Carey and be like, "Who's Marlene Dietrich?" Basically I don't know her. And Dietrich would be like, "I never met her. She doesn't go anywhere anyway." So after having tons of friends in common and working with the same exact people, it is just too hard to believe that they did not ever know each other. Some people actually speculated that they had a horrible fight and something terrible never came to light, and then there's rumors about a giant love affair. So writer Diana McEllen wrote in her book about Dietrich her own theory on the subject. So according to her, Marlene and Garbo met in 1925 on set for a movie called Joyless Street. Greta was starring in the film and Marlene had a minor role. Supposedly, they fell in love and had a short but heartbroken relationship that ended when Dietrich spread around a rumor that the poor little peasant Greta wears dirty underwear. I don't know how the writer got there, but apparently she found that out. In a very cinematic way, the author tells us the way they fell in love is that Greta had to faint in Marlene's arms, and that's where everything began. So after Greta Garbo first came to America, because she was from Sweden, then Marlene came from Germany, and because they were both first-generation Americans, apparently one of Greta's friends approached her and warned Marlene never to speak to Greta. So then she agreed, and Marlene told Greta to do the same thing. And then after that, apparently in the press, they're saying that for decades they denied each other's existence. So I don't know. I mean, there's no real concrete factual evidence that they were in a relationship, but we do have evidence they knew each other and worked together and went to parties together. And we also have lots of biographers and friends of a friends who basically say, to say it's not crazy to believe that they had a relationship. They both were also bisexual women in the time of the golden era of Hollywood. In 1945, Orson Welles had a dinner party and Marlene and Greta both attended. It's said that they didn't talk to each other anything more than just polite thank yous or please or yes or no. So if they had met once before, why did they keep insisting they never hung out with each other? So now we're back to speculation and we'll probably be there forever unless something more substantial comes to light eventually. It is factually true that Marlene Dietrich had something she called a sewing circle with her and other women, which was basically a play on words from the older 1800s era when women would come together and sew and make quilts and have a Friday night together. So we do know for sure that Greta Garbo did attend a few of Marlene's sewing circles. So back to Marlene's real life and badass moments. In the 1950s, Confidential magazine is on the rise, and Confidential magazine was one of the first people magazine, gossip magazines that printed whatever they wanted. So this is also a time before there was a lot of laws about paparazzi and press. Confidential magazine could pretty much go undercover and do whatever they wanted back then. So in the 50s, Confidential magazine journalists had insiders everywhere, and they knew how to find the dirt on anyone, and that's what they did with Marlene. In July 1955, the magazine wrote an article outing Marlene as a bisexual woman, and they named her love affairs from her early days in Berlin all the way up through Hollywood. They specifically said, all through the Roaring '20s, the German capital was a global headquarters for the most shameless perversion. Its streets were crammed with nighteries for the odd and their owners so strict that a normal person was denied admission. Girls making like boys was of such little concern there, and we regularly noted such cavorting as nonchalantly as they recorded the more unusual affairs occurred. They said a lot more, but they named every single person and left nothing to speculate about Marlene, her sexuality, and who she's been with. At a time like 1955 America, an article like this could quite literally end your career right on the spot. 1 second you had it all, and the next second you're basically vintage canceled. Every actor at that time would have sued the magazine for slander, but Marlene didn't do it. She verbally said to the press, she doesn't care. And you know what? Her career wasn't even damaged. She kept going. She was still in the mainstream, she wasn't ousted, and then even in the 60s, when she was middle-aged, she had a hugely successful live concert performance series that she did all over America and in Europe, and she continued to be a huge name and a star up through her passing. Marlene is an incredible example of strength and not being in fear of who you truly are, of embracing queerness on so many different levels and pushing boundaries. She never asked for acceptance, she never took it for granted, and she always had respect. If you like this video and you want more content on other queer stars in Hollywood, let me know in the comments below and my team and I can definitely do another video. Happy Pride!
I just can't help it.